Good evening. I'm Asma Naeem, the Dorothy Wagner Wallace Director here at the Baltimore Museum of Art. It's my great pleasure to welcome you, friends of the French Embassy in Villa Albertine, to this hybrid presentation on the art of pattern, Henri Matisse, and Japanese woodcut artists. The Baltimore Museum of Art, or the BMA as we call it, has long had a special connection to French art. The museum gained international renown in 1950 when it was bequeathed the Cone collection, which included 600 works by Matisse, as well as many other important French modern artists. Today, the collection, I'm proud to say, holds over 1,400 works by Matisse. We are considered the world's largest public collection, as well as an entire center devoted to the study of his works. Thus, you can imagine how thrilled we are to partner with Villa Albertine for the Museum Talks program, and I am pleased there has been so much interest in this glorious exhibition. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more to see at the BMA, so I invite you to come and visit and see this exhibition and our collection in person. Bonne soirée. Au revoir.
Good evening. I am cultural attaché at Villa Albertine, the French Embassy, the French Institute for Culture and Education at the French Embassy in the US. And I thank Asma for her one production here at the BMA. And I am also delighted to welcome you here tonight, live from the BMA, for this fantastic new episode of Museum Talks, our series dedicated to French art in American museums. And tonight we are honored to have Francis Klapthor and Katy Rothkopf joining us for a fantastic webinar focusing on creative Henri Matisse and Japanese woodcut artist, the art of pattern. This episode is very special because it's taking place here, and we are very grateful for colleagues and friends here at the BMA for co-organizing this episode and accepting to welcome us here. And I'm not sure if she needs a further introduction, but again, Faya Causey would be our moderator here tonight. She is a lecturer, educator, and scholar with interests ranging from the Paleolithic to the present. She earned her PhD from UC Santa Barbara, California, and she recently retired as the head of academic programs at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Although her primary field is ancient art, her best-known work is on amber. Her first publications were on the Impressionist Caillebotte and Pissarro, and her most recent work is on Paul Cézanne. So Katy, Frances, and Faya, thank you so much for being with us today for what promises to be a wonderful episode of Museum Talks. Faya, I'm happy glad you're with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan. It's a pleasure to be here to moderate this program tonight. First, we will have a presentation by curator Katy Rothkopf about the museum's history, showcasing the museum's important donors, the Cohen sisters, and BMA's important collection of Matisse. This, in turn, will be followed by a visit in these galleries looking at individual works of art with Katy and with the other co-curator, Frances. Just enough today, in our hour, after the presentations, we will have about 15 minutes for a question and answer period. So if you have a question at any time, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of the page. I want to say just a few words about our curators. First of all, Francis Klapthor is the interim department head of the arts of Africa, the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific Islands. I'm here at the BMA, and she's responsible for the exhibition, research, growth, and refinement of some 3,200 objects that include Indian metalwork, Chinese ceramics, Asian textiles, and export artworks. Katy, who we'll hear from in just a moment, is the Anne and Ben Cohn Memorial Director of the Ruth R. Martyr Center for Matisse Studies here at the BMA, and she's Senior Curator of European Painting and Sculpture. In her 23 years at the Baltimore Museum of Art, Katy led the reinstallation of the Cohn collection and has organized significant shows of French art and of French Impressionists at the museum, notably Monet and Pissarro. In a recent exhibition, Katy examined the close friendship between Baltimore collector Etta Kahn and artist Henri Matisse. Now, in the presentation, you will hear from Katy in an overview, and then we will have this live walkthrough with Katy and Francis in the galleries. So I'm turning it over now to Katy.
Thank you so much, Faya, for everyone for this wonderful event. We're so excited to be here. Francis and I would like to welcome you to this conversation, first about the Cone collection of the Baltimore Museum of Art, and about our current show, The Art of Pattern, Henri Matisse and Japanese woodcut artists. The Cone collection is considered the crown jewel of the holdings of the BMA and features works from all over the world, but is best known for its collection of European modernism. Clarabelle Cone and her younger sister Etta were brought up in Baltimore. Clarabelle was for the first generation of female doctors in this country and attended the Women's Medical College of Baltimore. Its Johns Hopkins University did not accept women into their medical school at that time. Etta graduated from high school but did not go further and spent her early adult years with her parents and taking care of them as they got older. Most to buy something to decorate the family sitting room after the death of their father. She could have bought antique furniture or a rug, but for some reason, she decided to spend the money on paintings by the American Impressionist Theodore Robinson. We do not know why she chose Robinson's work, as he was not well known then, just as he is not well known enough today. But include maybe the arrival in 1897 of Gertrude and Leo Stein, two siblings from California who were attending Johns Hopkins and became close friends with Etta and Clarabelle. Perhaps the two sets of siblings discussed buying art. We have no evidence that the Cohen family had been interested in acquiring art before this time. But Etta and her sister-in-law attended the preview of the auction of Robinson's studio contents in New York, and Etta made notes in the catalog but became too nervous to stay for the sale, so she had a family friend go instead. Her instructions were to buy, quote, as many as you can. And he was able to buy 5 paintings by Theodore Robinson at that auction for $300, which is quite a deal. And we see at left one of the beauties that has remained in our collection. Stein relocated to Paris several years later and continued to play an essential role in the Cohen's art education. The Steins became involved with contemporary artists and thinkers in Paris. And during their visits abroad, the Cohens met some of the Steins' new friends at their weekly salons at their apartment in the Rue de Fleurus. In 1905, Etta was introduced to Pablo Picasso when Gertrude was sitting for her very famous portrait that's now in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Gertrude thought Etta wouldn't mind sitting and keeping her company because it was quite boring sitting for her portrait. And from that first visit, Etta bought just a couple of works on paper. Then she came back with her sister a few weeks later. They bought a few more works. And by the end, the Coat sisters had bought more than 110 works by Pablo Picasso. And we see at right, Picasso drew himself with his hat in hand in a sweet sketch that he sent to Etta, hoping that she would return to his studio to buy a few more things. Following year, after having met Picasso, in 1906, Gertrude and Leo's sister-in-law, Sarah Stein, who was married to their eldest brother, Michael, brought Etta to meet Henri Matisse, who was her favorite contemporary artist at the time. Just like the Picasso, Etta bought a couple of works on paper during their first visit, including the watercolor that we see at left. In the 75 years, Etta's BMA has grown to more than 1,400 examples, the most of any public institution in the world. And I just want to show you a few of the highlights of our Matisse collection with the hope that you all will, of course, come here to Baltimore to see them in person. At upper left, we see the first painting by Matisse that Etta Cohn purchased in 1906. It's his Yellow Pottery for Provence from 1905, which would have been a shocking work to have brought back to Baltimore at that time, as there's a lot of unfinished raw canvas in the foreground of the work. Next to it, also up in the top row, is Clarabelle Cohn's masterful purchase of the Blue Nude, which she bought in 1926. She would have known it from Gertrude and Leo Stein's apartment. a work that really changed the face of the Combe collection. In the lower row, we see two wonderful sculptures by Matisse. The sisters were very fervent collectors of his sculpture. He made about 80 works, and in the collection, we have over 20 examples. So it's a really strong, we have strong holdings of his work. His wonderful yellow dress in the lower row is a work that really signals the end of his paintings from the 1920s and the beginning of a new period for him in the 1930s. And then at far right, the two girls against a red and green background from 1947 is the last painting by Matisse that Edicon ever purchased, and one that really signals the end of his easel painting at the end of his career. In 1929, Clara Balcon, the older sister, dies unexpectedly after brief illness. In her will, she gave her collection to her sister, Etta, her younger sister, but also expressed the hope that if the city of Baltimore could learn to appreciate the spirit of modern art, she would like the collection to go to the BMA, which had moved to our current location that same year. Etta was extremely upset by the death of her sister, who was both her closest symbol and her best friend. At that time, Matisse was in the midst of a major mural project for the Barnes Foundation, which was then located outside of Philadelphia. He decided to make the trip to Baltimore during one of those U.S. visits to pay his condolences to Etta after the death of her sister. It was just a short one-night trip, but during that visit, he was able to see works by his colleagues, by his artistic heroes, as well as his own works that he may not have seen for many years. It was then that Matisse realized that if he played his cards right, he could have a major presence and an important museum on the East Coast of the United States, one of his great dreams. For example, after returning back to France several years later, he started working on another reclining nude in a different shade, no longer blue, but pink. And to make sure that Etta bought the work, he decided to document the making of this, what started off as a reclining nude on a chaise with a vase of flowers behind her. And over the course of 6 months, took photographs of it, the different states of it, as though they were states of a print. And at the end of this period, and he sent Etta 2 letters, including 22 of these photographs, with the hope that she would be intrigued, because, of course, he had really made them as a response to having seen the blue nude in her apartment for the first time in at least a dozen years. And luckily for us, he achieved his goal, and she went ahead and purchased the work as soon as he was finished. The Coen sisters bought other major works by artists other than Matisse, although you wouldn't think so from what I'm saying. They purchased a beautiful Gustave Courbet, beautiful works by Paul Cézanne. They each bought their own work by Vincent van Gogh. They were really interested in providing the context for Matisse and Picasso and looking at the artists that weren't so inspirational to them. Each sister made their own choice. They had their own money. Their funds came from their family's textile business that was based in North Carolina. The Coen mills were some of the largest producers of denim in the U.S. in the first half of the 20th century, allowing them the freedom to travel and buy works of art for many, many years. Etta Coen passed away in 1949, 20 years after her sister Clarabelle. Luckily for us, the BMA had become much more accepting of modern art, and the collection of more than 3,000 items became part of the museum's holdings. Etta even left money to build a new wing dedicated to the Coen collection, which opened in 1957. This is a photo of it currently. Here's how it looked when it started. Very spare, very modern. The finishes were very sort of typical museum architecture of the 1950s. Etta had nothing to do with these choices. As you see, in the 70s, we went through a purple phase with some velvet couches, then back to a simple set. But almost 25 years ago, we decided to make the space more elegant, more domestic in scale, believe it or not. We actually lowered the ceilings 4 or 5 feet, because these works were shown in a domestic setting for most of their lives before coming to the museum. We currently have a whole gallery that's just dedicated to Matisse's works from his time in Nice, from the late teens, 20s, 30s, and 40s, and here's just a little taste. with the hope that you will, of course, come and visit us in Baltimore. And then the other works by Impressionists, Post-Impressionists, and early modern artists that are not Matisse as well. Tom Primo is now at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, thrilled about looking at some new copper plates that have just entered the collection, how they compared to the actual etchings that are in our collection. We've also hosted some of our upper level members for a variety of exhibitions and tours, as you can see, very well attended, and people are really looking, which is always exciting. I thought you may be interested to see that the Friends of the Musée du Louvre came to get a tour and to get both a tour of the common wing as well as a tour of the study room earlier this year. So it was very nice to be able to show off some of the wonderful French things that we had in our collection. The Washington Print Club, who are based at DC, they've come for a tour, as even the Washington Ballet Board of Trustees has come to see us. We're always interested in partnering with other cultural institutions in the area. And they were putting on a new ballet, which was inspired by Matisse's cutout. So we thought, well, why don't you come and look at his jazz book in person. And so it's really a very vibrant, interesting place. I encourage everyone to come. And we will now turn to the art of pattern. Henri Matisse, a Japanese woodcut artist, and Francis and I will take you through some of our favorites, all of the works, and show you some of our favorite things.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I have to say, speaking for myself, it's one of my favorite hours at a museum when the darkness has just fallen and the galleries are empty and it's very quiet and very intimate. So please join us for a close look at the works on view.
We're going to walk around the gallery as though you were touring with us, which is, of course, we would really love to have happen before the show closes on January 5th. I will start on the round. We'll take turns walking down the wall. This is Matisse's seated odalisque, left knee bent, ornamental background, and checkerboard, a real mouthful. A beautiful work from the collection. You know, Matisse was always, throughout his career, was fascinated with patterns and decoration. His work of the 1920s often featured European models posing in his studio as odalisques, or enslaved harem women, in costumes and surrounded by colorful decorative textiles, mostly drawn from the Islamic world. In these compositions, his focus was frequently split between creating the make-believe setting and with all the detail that goes into these decorations, and conveying the sensuality of the female figure in a very interior space. I mean, here we are in a very interior space. There's not a window to be seen. There is, it is a very enclosed, private, quiet space, at least to me. And this sort of interest in the odalisque was certainly a popular subject from other European artists, primarily in the 19th and early 20th century, for a predominantly male audience. Now, this particular work, although small in size, I guess you can see how big she is compared to me. She is nearly subsumed by the ornamentation on the walls, on the floors, and on the fabrics. The model is an Italian woman named Zita. We only know her by her first name, who worked for Matisse pretty briefly in about 1928, at the end of the 1920s, when he was very well known for these odalisque images. With such a richly patterned setting, you can start to lose some of the details. You're so busy looking at every corner that sometimes you miss the embroidery on her beautiful velvet jacket, or the jewelry around her neck or around her ankles. Matisse has put everything in its perfect place, sort of like the pieces on the checkerboard. Everything is sort of like a jigsaw puzzle, perfectly placed, perfectly full. And I think that's one of the things that's so interesting about him is he dazzles you. And I think this is a work that is particularly dazzling and absolutely.
Well, the Japanese prints on view were created between 1810 and 1835. They depict women associated with a world of glamour and style known as the Yoshiwara, a licensed prostitution district in the city of Edo, present-day Tokyo. During the daytime, tourists joined Edo's male and female residents to observe the spectacle of current hairstyles and fashion. on display there. Artist Kikugawa Geisa Eisen, and Ujigawa Kumisada, also later known as Toyokuni III, presented their female subjects wearing layered robes embellished with recognizable symbolic decorative motifs and patterns. Japan's courtesans and geishas embodied an idealized concept of femininity and beauty. These prints, widely circulated in Japan, advertised businesses and influenced fashion, decorated homes, and promoted the illusion of a world of uncovered pleasure, amusement, diversion offered by the brothels and their inhabitants. So again, it's in a way similar to the Matisse paintings of this idea of illusion and artifice. So looking more closely at these two pictures, at the top, we see Eizan depicting a very prominent courtesan Hanaogi. She's wearing several patterned robes, including her cherry blossom crest here. You can see again on her child attendant. And beside her is a woman smoking a pipe. Her inner robe is decorated with small birds, plovers, which are symbols of endurance for the fact that they skim across the waves, the waves of the sea against tremendous winds. They brave the winds as they skim over the sea. Below, Eisen depicts another courtesan, Kisagawa. She's wearing a robe decorated with a barnacle and an undersea palace here, which emanates from a clamshell, offering clients an eroticized fantasy world, perhaps. Just so there's no mistaking her identity, Kisagawa's personal crest of paired birds appears at least 12 times on the sleeves of her robe, on her sash down here, very prominently, and on the ends of all of her many hairpins. The name of her brothel is prominently shown on the lanterns beside her. So there's making no mistake of who the women are and also the environment.
The Ari. This is Henri Matisse's seated Orisque in tulle skirt. This is a lithograph. Matisse is best known as a painter, but he was also a wonderful draftsman, a sculptor, a printmaker. He loved making illustrated books. He did all of it. And his printmaking practice in the 20s was a really big part of the work that he was doing. He was really, really interested in providing a way for people that couldn't maybe afford his paintings to have a chance to own something by him. And this work I just find so very beautiful and amazing in the way that he could do this translucent skirt, which is covered with its own floral background. And I don't know if we could get any closer to it, but you see that the wreaths that are on the upholstered chair are poking through. And so you get this sort of cacophony of patterning while we're looking at her nude body, or at least she's topless. I'm not quite sure what's going on under the skirt, and that's fine. We'll just leave it like that. And that's all set off by this incredible textile that is behind the chair. And, one of the things that's so interesting about Matisse at this moment is this love of theatricality. He is treating his studio like a stage set. And he is, taking things and moving them and getting it just right. He was someone that, really worked really hard to make these backgrounds as interesting and full of detail. And here, she ends up, what surrounds her is, if not more important, certainly just as important as, the unclothed beauty in the center, which making for very, very beautiful and compelling work from the collection.
And turning now to Eisen again, who depicted the very deluxe high fashion Kisagawa. Eisen turned his attention to the full range of women associated with Edo's licensed pleasure quarters, from the recognized courtesan such as Kisagawa, from a prominent brothel who turned heads and set styles, to an entertainer who represented a different kind of chic. Very different. this single figure in her swirling robes. Below, Utagawa Kunisada produced pictures of beautiful women, but specialized really in actors. So again, we see this relationship between the works of art and the theater and the idea of performance. Kunisada's beautiful women often include the styles and patterns associated with actors of the day. To the details of both of the prints, this more modest robe and hairstyle with only 2 pins really suggests a more modest setting and a different level of individual. And the swirling double striped lattice design really animates the figure and draws the eye to this alluring inner red robe. So it's very overt. To us, it's very subtle. To the Japanese, it would have been very overt. Small here in the case of the Kunisada, I think one of the most delightful elements is this tiny shaved patch of bare skin, bare skull within the hairstyle above her left eyebrow. It was a style that was first originally the mark of young male kabuki actors, and then came to be copied by women at the time.
Here we have Matisse's standing odalisque reflected as a mirror, which is a very sort of monumental, beautiful painting. Yet another work, this from 1923. And what's so interesting about this use of the mirror, it allows Matisse to sort of double up the patterning. So we have the model was a woman named Henriette Carrère. She was Matisse's top model from the 1920s. Henriette was someone who Rieger could rely on. And I think when he worked with his models, he gave them a lot of credit for being partners in making these compositions work. This work would not have worked if Henriette wasn't such a terrific model. She was a trained dancer. He also encouraged her to paint. And so they had a very good friendship along the way. She was close friends with his daughter, Marguerite. He was often around the studio during this period. Some wonderful paintings of the two of them together, including one art collection, which is upstairs now in this exhibition. And Henriette was, because she was athletic, she could hold a pose for a really long time. So we were really like that because he was, he worked long and hard, and he really wanted people around him that have the same kind of work ethic. And so here we have her posing against the mirror, and again, if you see the textiles that surround her, there's the Harris pants, I think, or skirt that she's wearing. There's the checked chair behind her. There's a beautiful wall textile to the right of that. And what's so fascinating is sort of Matisse's love of an interest in pattern and color and decoration was really apparent. He was raised in a part of the region of northern France that was known both for its sugar beet business, less exciting for us today, as well as for his luxury textile business. And many of his family members were actually in the textile business. He himself obviously was not, but I think for him, he grew up in a town where there wasn't a museum. And so what he found beauty in was in textiles. And if any of you have the chance to read Hilary Sperling's fantastic biography on Matisse, she discovered an actual sample book of some of the textiles in someone's attic. Henriette really plays such a beautiful role here. And one thing that I would definitely love to point out, which we never noticed, and this is, one of Faya always wants to know about how we do a show and what things are happening, which I think is so terrific. Our fall color is one that we love very much. This painting is almost always undoing the cone wing upstairs because it's a favorite of mine. But when we brought it downstairs and we put it on the blue, all of a sudden, the little tiny check in the crook of her elbow, which I never really paid that much attention to when it's upstairs on a pale wall, really came to the fore. And you really see the attention to detail and the beauty Matisse was able to put in this wonderful painting.
Now with pause of this beautiful brocade sash, And I'll very quickly say that this is very reflective of our process at the museum, in which we have a lot of conversation amongst various members of the staff. And in this case, Asma was at that meeting, and she was the one that challenged us to, can you find a textile for the, and we're looking at all these prints, can you find a textile for the hour? And here, I'll step over, I think this way, maybe. And so we have these wonderful sashes. And in fact, this particular example dates probably to around the 1920s. So it's very close in time to the paintings by Matisse. The name brocade gives the name, this kind of a colorful brocade fabric, provided the name for the fully colored prints of courtesans introduced in the 1760s, nishikie, literally brocade pictures. Here, the nested diamonds symbolize prosperity. So we felt this was a really wonderful choice. Again, it's a sash. It was worn in an elaborate tie, tied in the front. Courtesans tied their sashes in the front. Geisha tied their sashes in their backs, at their backs, in order to free up their hands for playing music, conversing with guests, serving food, and serving as entertainers broadly to their clients.
And I will say that this exhibition was the first one where we brought paintings from the Cone wing downstairs. Up to this point, our last 5 shows, they've all featured things that are normally either in our vaults, works on paper. But this is the first time we had paintings in here, and they, I was a little worried about how they would look, and they look really good. So I don't know. There may be more paintings from the Cone collection downstairs as well as upstairs going forward. This is Matisse's Seated Odalisque left leg bent from 1926, and it features Henriette der Carrère again. We had just seen her in the Odalisque with reflected in the mirror, and she comes back again. Here she's wearing this beautiful transparent blouse, which I just love the way that he paints it with this sort of wonderful confidence, and the actual painterly technique is just gorgeous, and the way that he has formed her body, particularly in that translucent blouse, which has lots of color and a lot of beautiful details. I feel like I'm really looking at Henriette as opposed to someone playing a role. It feels very different to me than some of the other Odalisques that we've been looking at, where she's really herself. I think part of that is, here she is playing this role, the idea of the Odalisque and, what life must be like in this sort of fantasy world, was one that, many artists have played with. And I think in this case, you really see that she's really a woman of the 1920s. She's got her bobbed haircut. She does not look like she is hanging around anywhere else, yet posing in the studio, in this beautiful setting. We think that what may look like screens in the background are actually are textiles he's tacking up. He really had an incredible collection of textiles that he collected throughout his life, and they were what he referred to as his working library. And they went from the most haute couture, beautiful dresses that he would buy for particular paintings. Like there's some paintings where there's one dress that we see once and we never see again. There are others, like in this case, these green harem pants are a huge hit. And I think he just loved that color, and it worked so beautifully with the reds and blues. And, I think the red tile floor was what was the tile floor in the studio. And so powering that popple green was something that was particularly exciting to him. And as I said, she was someone that was so influential to everything that he was doing.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to move a little more quickly, if I might, so that we'll have time for some questions and comments at the end. Very quickly, here we see Asen again. The one was interested in the full portrayal of women in the Yoshiwara. showing a very young courtesan wearing her hair tied, slicked with wax, tied back in the style of young women in a very densely and lovely layering of pattern. Now here it back to Azon, showing us a courtesan, the deluxe courtesan in an interior setting. The time is approaching 6 a.m. Her hair and makeup and attire are perfect. She's preparing to say goodbye to her client who will leave at 6. She's pausing a moment to have a smoke a cigarette, chatting with this a fellow resident of the brothel who's peeking around this floor screen. The decoration or the design I wanted to call her attention to is this pinwheel of the hemp flower, which was something that was associated with a male kabuki actor who specialized in female roles. Now on to the next. Okay, we're jumping to the very end because this is really a stunning print. It's a pillar print, 2 sheets joined vertically. It may have been noted as a scroll that was intended to be shown on the pillar, which was a common architectural feature in Japanese interiors of the 19th century and earlier. So it was a very purposeful image. And the thing is about this image, why it's such a fantastic point to culminate, it's a culmination just because of the plethora of images from, again, the hemp pattern of her red inner robe to the cherry blossoms decorating her hairpins, to the chrysanthemums on the bottom of the robe, the butterflies, which symbolize joy, and the chrysanthemums, longevity. And then finishing up with this pair of beautiful long-tailed pheasants who are shown on the branches of a plum tree, symbolizing or signifying that the beauty of the one amplifies the beauty of the other. So we're hoping that the beauty of the Matisse and the beauty of these Japanese printmakers similarly amplify the work of these separate artists. Thank you so much.
We have a few questions, and the first one is that the exhibition is open until January 5th, which is which day? Which is a Sunday. Which is a Sunday, so up until 5 o'clock. Yeah, I'm gonna show you. And also what to say is that the website, for those who can't come, the website has many other sayings more about our individual work art and a great resource. Some of the questions we have, I think, are very important for us. One of them is to ask, how did the Japanese print collection at the BMA get started?
Interesting. That's a great and a lovely question. Thank you so much. Very quickly. Our founding trustee, Julius Levy, had a family business again, but taking him to Japan to buy straw for men's hats in the truly decades of the 20th century. His few very nice prints are included in this exhibition. They were one of the first to come to the museum, as were things bequeathed by Etta Cohn in the 1950s, and they make up the rest of the prints with one exception of the purchase.
Okay, so we also have a question about Matisse's involvement in textiles. And does that play a role in his friendship with the Cohn sisters in any way? What is the textile
connection? Well, it is fascinating that everyone was so interested in them. I think Matisse, it's funny, I think the interest in how they sort of lived with things layered on things, as we saw in the presentation, at least on the Cohn side. I think that was a shared aesthetic that may have inspired Etta to be interested in his works and Clairvaux. I think it's funny, the Cohns, the textiles in the Cohn family were making, we were not very interested. I mean, denim, I know everybody loves their Levi's 501s, but they weren't full of color and texture pattern. They weren't interested in American textile. textiles. They were interested in textiles primarily of things that they found when they were out of the country, as most of their collection was purchased out of the country. So a lot of it was being on trips, being in France, being in London, being wherever. They loved lace.
That's what I was going to ask because, and it's, I believe I read that Etta was particularly interested in lace, and that was two of the first big collections she gave was lace, and that how and your oldest pieces are 1600s.
Oh yeah, beautiful French Chantilly lace. I mean, all sorts of beautiful things. And our lace collection from the cones is quite extraordinary. And it's funny. We have their account books for some of their early tricks, and they would just make lists of what they bought. Whether it was stamps or flowers, or works of art. But and then the laces were extremely expensive, and they were a major part of their collecting interest. Very much so.
Yeah, I think at one point I read that the Matisse collection and the lace collection were two of her largest gifts to the museum. Well, going from lace, we have a question. Does the Matisse textile library exist as a collection today?
I think there are things that the Matisse family owns, but they are not accessible. They're privately owned. They're privately held. There was a wonderful exhibition on some of these textiles, 15, 18 years ago at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was Fabric of Dreams, and was one of the titles. And it was at I think the Royal Academy in the Met, and Rebecca Rapinoe was one of the figures. I know there are a few things at the Matisse Museum in Nice, the Museum Matisse in Nice, they have, and some of his textiles. Some things have helped gifts, but a lot of things are still private.
Since you mentioned the Matisse Museum, how many museums, in addition to this one with its major collection, which are the other Matisse museums if somebody is going to get rid of those out?
Well, there were two official Musée Matisses, not just regular museums with great Matisse, but there are two Matisse museums. One is in Nice, Musée Matisse in Nice in the south of France, where he spent. He first went in 1917 to the south of France and spent most of the rest of almost every year. He would be there for some period of time.
We have time for a couple more questions, and one of them is how did the two of you, you mentioned that the director Osma, encouraged you, challenged you, but how did you come to this when you might have done other things? That is I think one of the aspects of this series which is so marvelous is that we see curators in action. So get us behind the scenes. How did it happen?
Well, this was not our first idea because it was sort of the easiest idea. So we tried some different ideas and before agreeing that this is really the one that made the best story to tell on a particular collection, which we are very fortunate to have, of course, such a robust and wonderful collection of the Matisse. But in terms of our Japanese prints, I really started to wonder, about all the patterning that was covering the women of Japan versus Matisse, who was revealing these bodies against a pattern background. And Katy was willing to engage with that.
Which brings us to the question, and that is, did Matisse, there's several parts to it, did Matisse owe any woodcut prints? This person said, I understand many French artists collected Japanese art, since the prints were often used to promote kabuki theater plays, or they also used as advertising tacked up around town, not considered valuable to the Japanese public.
Yes, I think that's fair. These were not considered works of fine art in the way that paintings were considered fine, or even other luxury materials like twist and enamel and lacquer. These were utilitarian, essentially, and they were promotional. They were, in many cases, advertisement. They were used as decoration.
I haven't myself I've seen pictures of bookshops with prints. I've not seen any scenes around of the city with prints shown on the walls of anywhere, right? But, thinking about the pillar print, the interior of a Japanese home, unlike the Cohn's home and Matisse's undoubtedly, was quite spare. And so, the individual works of art really had a tremendous impact, whether it was a natural painting, so just a screen in one of the prints, or the pillar print.
And Matisse did have a small collection of Japanese books. As when we first started thinking about it, with any show about, we didn't want to do a show about inspiration. We wanted to do a show about juxtaposing two very different types of art making from very different times and seeing the similarities and the differences. And that was always our goal. He certainly had an interest, as the question suggests. Lots of late 19th and early 20th century artists were completely obsessed with Japanese woodcut prints and the cropping and the colors. And, there were many artists that you could see that represented, and you could, they wrote very openly about it. His was a little bit more subtle in terms of talking about it, but he certainly was well aware of it and was, would have known about it very simply. But we really wanted to stay away from an inspirational show and a concert show. It had to be more about literal. What do you see? What do you say?
And the use of patterning to entice our eyes and to draw our eyes and to animate these images, really. And so the patterning is a tool, and one of the many tools that artists use in their process of creation.
To seduce our eye, to entice us, to, make this longer, make it longer.
So we're gathering, especially from your enthusiasm at this point, that you had a good time putting the show together. You had a great time.
We're going to be really depressed on January 5th when our show is over.
And they hung down so fast, and then they're like, oh. Okay. But we're coming to the end now, and I would like to say, really, everybody who tuned in, we had a few problems a little bit with sound, but most for sticking with us. And anybody who wants to see this, it will be posted on the YouTube site for the museum talks of the Villa Albertine here in Washington. So again, it's on January 5th. And it's important to say how the BMA is free admission to regular exhibitions. Walk in, come in, you're invited. I want to extend real thanks to the team from the French Embassy, Henri and Jan, and to thank the Villa Albertine, the Embassy of France and America, and especially Linda Franoir, the cultural attaché, and Jan, who is the deputy. So please come back next time there is one, and certainly go online, see the collection, and enjoy. That's what Matisse would have enjoyed too. Thank you.